Yesterday when Candy and I were talking, Candy asked me the question, did we think of Mr. Narayanan as a guru or as God? We debated that a little and we concluded it's a bit of both really. That there were times when he was God, there were times when he was guru. And, was he never a boss, a CEO or MD? RT and I used to call him Bossman in our brand room gossip. You know, as soon as we finish a meeting with him, obviously we come back and gossip. And we used to call him Bossman. Bossman was, there were bosses, but there was only one Bossman, that was Mr. Narayanan. Uh, my memory of Mr. Narayanan goes back to the year 1970, when I joined as a management trainee on 4th of May. And about June, July, there was some annual sales conference in Hotel Ashoka. And we are both sitting in the very last row. And Shiva Prakasam was then the general sales manager, and he was presenting a plan to change the salesman incentive system. Before 1970, salesmen were getting incentives on orders booked. Shiva Prakash was talking about changing the salesman incentive from order booking to invoicing. So the salesmen are all very agitated because you see they booked the entire year's order in the first quarter. There was so much agitation amongst the salesmen. So I asked Mr. Narayanan, Mr. Narayanan, should you really push this because they are very unhappy? He said, Balu, we are just, soaking it in. We are seeding the idea. We have no plan to do it this year. It's actually going to be done next year. But as you know, we are taking away something easy and asking them to work a lot more to get the same incentive. Now, after the second stage of paying incentives on invoicing, we'll start paying incentives on collections. At that time, Hindustan Lever was having a system of collecting a signed check from who they called RS, retail stockists. We call them ADs, authorized dealer. So Mr. Narayanan said, Balu, we are just seeding the idea so it will soak in. So by the time we introduce it next year, most resistance would have died. Now that tells you something about Mr. Narayanan. How far ahead does he think? And how well he understands the human mind and how it adapts, how it operates. Just think about this. If only Government of India has soaked the idea of changing the farm laws in the minds of the farmers for a few years. Mr. Narayanan's logic was that if we keep talking about it, the salesman will realize at some point of time the change will happen. It is inevitable. So that tells you something about how much of a visionary Mr. Narayanan is, how much patience he has got. Whenever people in manufacturing and finance refuse to cooperate with marketing, and I would ask him, look, how can we pull together as one company? He would say, Balu, just wait and see. All these people will fall by the wayside. Those who are progressive, those who think of this as one company will stay and prosper. So he was that much of a visionary. He was that much of a patient man. And he understood human mind far better than anyone else. There are so many other things I can talk about Mr. Narayanan. But if I do, I will be stealing your thunder, which is not the purpose of this meeting. Before I close, I want to warmly thank Group Captain Vijay Kumar. We all know Mr. Narayanan, so we are fond of him. We care for him. We have our affection for him. But Vijay, what made you come and offer this to me? I mean, you have not met Mr. Narayanan.
Good evening to everyone. It's indeed a privilege. In fact, during the course of Pons Veteran Radio Speak series and my interaction with the leaders and as well as Mr. Balraman, I heard so much about Mr. Narayanan, and every time I hear, I get inspired. But it's my sad thing. I didn't have the privilege of working with him or even meeting him doing a thing. And I thought when Balraman offered this, could you do that? I said it's a great privilege and honor for MMA to facilitate this evening. and it's only the loss is entirely mine. I had an opportunity to work with him, and thanks so much to all the Ponds veterans for really inspiring so many members and so many people through your inspiring talk. And that is the reason where I heard so much about Mr. Narayanan. People so fondly remember him even after so many years of working with him. That shows, and that is what the loyalty we had in our armed forces, because we worked under one of the air marshals. We never forget him, forgive him, or whatever happened all through our life. Thank you, Mr. Balraman, for this opportunity. Indeed, grateful and privileged. Thank you.
Thank you, Group Captain. I have to recognize Mr. Udesh's presence here. Dilip, thank you for joining us. Your mic is muted. Hello.
It's my pleasure, Balu. Thank you.
Do you want to say a couple of words? I know you.
All I can say, Balu, is that I joined Ponds sometime in 1977 as a director, and I had known VR, as I used to call him, a wonderful person, patient, and always encouraging. We used to have meetings going on from 9 a.m. onwards, right up to 7 with a lunch break. And after 7, we'll again meet, have some refreshment, and talk about what had gone by in the meeting. That was all because of the encouragement and love and affection that Nari gave us. Thank you, Balu.
Thank you, Dilip. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for saying such things. Now, we do have a pre-agreed list. The next to come, I think, is Kannan Sitaram.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Balram. You sort of raised the question, Guru or God. I think as I speak today, I think of him, I remember him as a really wonderful human being. And I'm so glad that we have had this opportunity today to celebrate his life by sharing our memories. And I was thinking about all the memories that I have of him over the last so many years. And really today I'm full of warmth as I recollect some of those meetings, thoughts that we exchanged, views that we spoke about, etc. I joined Ponds in 81. He retired from Ponds in 91. So during those 10 years, I was at the head office for 7 of those 10 years. And of course, during the course of work, we interacted several times. But I was also part of the team which helped him prepare his AGM speeches. It was a truly interesting experience because on the one hand, it was not an easy thing to do. In those days, you had to handwrite the whole speech. He would meticulously edit those speeches. Then you kind of rewrote things and so on. And then after 2-3 versions, he was finally happy with how what he had in his mind was coming over. And then you had to go through preparing the 35mm slides. And it was not an easy thing to do because typefaces could be chipped, there could be pinholes in the slides, and so on and so forth. And then you had to sit at the back of behind the screen with a typewritten speech and click the slides as you progress, etc. So that was one side of working with him on the speeches. But the exhilarating part was he was trying to explore different ideas of management. And talking those through with him was something which was really, really mind expanding. He was totally, of course, convinced about the importance of culture. And of course, those words, a culture of character and competence, is something that lives with all of us. Ordinary people doing extraordinary things is another thing that he really felt deeply about. Every right carries with it an obligation was another very, very important thought that he had. And something that he said to me several times, which I have remembered to this date, is he said to me several times that a leader's duty is to be not kind, but to be fair. And I keep reflecting on that because for me, at least, whenever you think of a leadership issue, one that involves people, this again comes to me, what is the right thing to do? And then you apply this thought of, should you be kind or are you being fair? And then I think things fall into place. Above all, I think he was very, very convinced that to build successful Indian companies, you need to build an Indian style of management, something which was rooted in our Indian ethos. And his role model for that was that of the joint family. And his concept was that in a joint family, different members of the family come together, they draw strength from each other. And that's how the joint family really grows from strength to strength. And that, in some way, was the inspiration behind many of the things that he pursued at Pons, the kind of symbolisms, the kind of, if you like, organizational rituals that he felt were important to help the members of the Pons family understand what we were all about, actually. Very, very different to what the management books were talking about, which was more the US style, more, if I may call it, more mercenary approach to leadership. The big turning point was obviously 1986 when Unilever acquired CP Inc. And Mr. Narayanan very, very clearly understood that life had changed forever. And interestingly, his major concern was really what would happen to all of us, the members of his team. And he told me several times about what happened to Brook Bond when Unilever acquired Brook Bond. And he told me that Samuel had made a big mistake when he resisted Unileverization of Brook Bond. And he said that Samuel stood on his ego because he was more senior to the then chairman of Hindustan Lever. And that then really harmed careers of people at Brook Bond. And he was determined that that should not happen to us at Pons. So he threw the doors open for Hindustan Lever to walk in. But I must say, when I think back on some of those incidents, he was really a classy man. He did that with, in his own very inimitable style. Because as Hindustan Lever walked in, the stage was set for what he wanted Hindustan Lever to take out of it. And I'll just recall one incident, which was when Keki Dadi Seth came to visit us for the first time. Keki, even at that time, was on the fast track. He was director of personnel, director of PP, and Mr. Narayanan wanted to communicate to him the kind of quality of the team that was there at Pons. So after all the presentations by the Pons leadership team, we had lunch together, I think at the Connemara. And before lunch, all of us were invited to be there and just give a very, very brief introduction to us, what kind of schools we had been to, the kind of roles we had been to at Pons and so on. And as we were picking up our lunch from the buffet, Ms. Narayan asked me to sit next to Keki. And if I remember right, and I'm not quite sure, I think it was Candy who was seated on the other side of Keki. And I can tell you, Keki was blown over. He was telling us again and again that he was amazed to see the quality of management talent that Pons had assembled in the company. So, when you reflect on it, Unilever walked in, Hindustan Lever walked in. They were talking about what the Hindustan Lever HR systems were, but they walked out with all the messages that Mr. Narayanan wanted them to take home. And that was, I think, his very, very inimitable style, that to make sure that there was no perceived resistance to anything, but the messages were delivered. He also had this really wonderful habit of handwriting little notes. I was going through all the different stuff in my files, and I discovered this little handwritten note. I'm sure you can't see it.
No, we can't read it.
You can't read it. I will send it to you later if anybody is interested.
I am.
This is dated 20th of August 1981, right? And he just writes very briefly, Mr. Artin has just given me a copy of the IMA Alumnus May 1981 issue. I'm circulating it to all members of the management committee. Please accept our congratulations on winning the award for scholastic performance. If possible, please get a copy of the photograph that appears in these issues so that we can publish it in fragrance. Congrats once again and kind regards. And this was just the first of many such handwritten notes. Every single thing that you did, you received a little note of appreciation, right? And I think I was not the only one. I can assure that every single one out here must be having those little handwritten notes somewhere in their files. And that was something truly amazing about the man. I mean, there were more such notes. And, way back in 1986, Mrs. Narayanan may remember this. He was traveling to Darjeeling with Mrs. Narayanan.
He's listening in. Mrs.
Yeah.
Narayanan, welcome. Aarti, welcome. Ashwini, welcome.
And that is the only time I very briefly met Aarti and Ashwini. They were on the way to Darjeeling and I was posted in Calcutta. So I went to the station just to see if everything was okay for their trip. And I'd taken a little bag of mangoes for them to eat. And I gave to them and just said hello to him. And sure enough, when they got back to Madras, there was again that little handwritten note saying thank you. And when I met him next, there was again that he remembered. And he had this wonderful memory for everything. And he remembered to say thank you for just getting the mangoes. The girls really enjoyed the mangoes. My last meeting with him was in June of 2019. And Lakshmi and I had gone to Chennai to invite close family members for our daughter's wedding. So we met him and Mrs. Narayanan because it had been such a long time since we met them. And we wanted to invite them to Shilpa's wedding. I mean, stepping into their home at the manor was like being back at home. There was so much of warmth and affection and so many memories being exchanged. It was all so easy as a way of interaction. And we're just overwhelmed by the warmth and affection. He told me he wouldn't be able to make it to Bangalore for the wedding, but I didn't expect it, but he remembered, and that again was that little note from him saying congratulations to Shilpa and Chiro, wishing them luck in their wedding, and so on and so forth. So he was just amazing in the way he remembered and took the time out to make those little gestures, actually. So there are many more memories, but I will stop for now to allow others to continue to celebrate, the life of this wonderful man.
Thank you, Sita. MS, next is you, but I think Ravichandran has to catch a flight, so shall we invite him to speak? MS?
Yeah, it's fine if Ravichandran is online.
Yeah, because it's only 1 o'clock in the middle of the night in Sydney, so you can wait a little. Ravi, you are muted. Ravi, you are muted. Unmute your mic.
Unmuted. Hi, good day to all of you in whichever corners of the world that you are. Thank you, Balram, for that wry humor to start the day for me. Thanks, MS. Okay, Mr. Narayanan, Nari, for us, bossman, many of us called him bossman, is, for me, an enigma. I spent just 7 years in Ponds between 1974 to 1981. And out of that, just 3 years at the head office. First year, actually, many of you may not know, I was actually recruited from the Institute for Finance and Accounts. After a year or so, I decided that that's not going to be my cup of tea. I'll come to that later. Then he absorbed me in marketing, sales, and I quit when I was head of sales. Even full 7 years because Indianization happened during that time. Like Mr. Kannan Sitaram said about Unilever taking over, Indianization was another very churning moment in Ponds. Coming to Mr. Narayanan himself, I think I said enigma. Enigma because I don't know how to describe him. After 1981, my touch with him has been very few, except once in 1994, when I personally invited him to Bangalore for a Rotary presentation. He accepted, came over, I hosted him, and that's the last I saw him actually, 1994. So in those 7 years and in the formative years of me and in the initial years of Mr. Narayanan, who was absolutely a colossus in the company, I should say that my memory of him was an enigma. Guru or God, Balram said. I think it summarized in apt words what I had in my mind to say. I think he was both, to me, combined a guru and a God. Guru because he taught in every motion of his little finger, every word that he spoke, and every gesture of his, which is to lift his eyebrows at something, which, you wonder what happened. Did you say something wrong? Did you say something very right? It was a combination of warmth. It was a combination of anticipation. It is a combination of many feelings. I don't know whether fear is included in that evoked in me, and that's why he is an enigma. And at least for me, I don't know, I think we used to discuss this before within the group that we've all shared. We used to regurgitate those meanings, the statements or those gestures, and then try to understand the deeper meanings. And we came up with many, many deeper meanings as to what it could mean and learned from those things. That's not something that is easy. And it happened in every interaction. There was a note culture that Mr. Kannan Sitaraman said, oh my God, he was a master of notes in those days of no emails and no nothing. I still remember the warmth with which he used to send those notes, personal notes, other than the company performance-oriented ones. I remember in 1980, when I bought my car with a company loan, the first day I drove to the car, I had a note on my table, just 4 lines, saying, Ravi, congrats on acquiring a car. I hope to ride with you sometime. So, that sets him apart as someone who understood what each one was doing at that point of time, and then seeing a way to recognize that, to create a sense of togetherness, the family, joint family that you mentioned, and therefore to work harder at anything that he threw at you, which he did many times. Not just the job, but he threw many things at you other than the job. I think with the group we have discussed that. At least the 3 instances in my career of 7 years when he threw at me things which are very, very offline. First, in 1976, during Indianization, he asked me to be the back office for all the data generation for presenting to Ernst, not Ernst and Young, what is that, Balram? The
Ministry of Commerce? Ministry
yes, yeah, Minister of Commerce and also our consultant
Ministry of
to that.
RBI.
Yeah, yes, and then the second time, the third time I remember very well, the last 2 months of mine when he asked me to prepare a complete presentation to be presented to the CP board in 1981, February or March, on how to expand the export opportunities in order to meet the obligations from the Indianization. And in between, of course, the second one, which I think has been mentioned, the Pondicherry locating a factory land for a Pondicherry and getting it started in 27 days or something like that. My
18,
role was to find the
18 days.
My role was to find the land. 18 days. My role was to find the land. I was the area sales manager or something like that at the time. And these are things that taught you different facets of management, different ways of thinking about how to develop as an individual, and so on. I'll just end by saying 4 things that it took away from him in those brief 7 years. Attention to detail, meticulous planning, flawless execution, recognize success. I think these are 4 things that I took away at every point of time from any interaction that I had. And the personification of all these 4 was the sales conferences. In those days, every management trainee was given the next year's sales conference to be organized. So I joined in 74, 75 or 76, I organized. you know, the amount of work that you do at that time with all senior members of Ponds, which is RT, Tony, and Mr. Narayanan himself and the agency, and culminating in the final awards night, was a personification of these four things: attention to detail, meticulous planning, flawless execution, recognized success. And after that, he used to call and ask for the learnings in his room. And you know, I used to think of it as a sanctum sanctorum, his room. You enter his room at his bidding. You never entered on your own, at least those days. And you never knew what would be expected. But he used to call you and then said, okay, tell me what you learned. And he used to then summarize all the mistakes that we made, but in a beautiful way, without hurting you, and the successes that we created, and end up motivating you to try better and achieve better. He, to me, was an enigma. Of course, a great human being, a good mentor, which we couldn't recognize it as a mentor that way, but we learned a lot. I am overwhelmed when I heard the news. I was overwhelmed when I heard the news he passed away. Not that I had too many personal interactions with him, but he shaped my initial corporate life and the subsequent successes. Many of the successes that I had was based on the learnings that he imparted. Thank you, Mr. Narayanan. Rest in peace. I'm younger, but I can say God bless. Thank you.
Thank you, Ravi. MS, are you ready to take on? Hello.
Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you. When I told my wife Lalita that Mr. V Narayanan passed away, her spontaneous reaction was that it felt like someone in the family had passed away. If that is the reaction of a spouse, imagine how it was for those who actually knew Mr. Narayanan in the 80s and the 90s. It genuinely felt like a family Ponds, the Ponds of those days. It was recognized by others as well. I remember a colleague from Unilever, one of the Unilever companies overseas, said Ponds felt like a company warm and fuzzy, like a teddy bear. In contrast to another company, which I won't name, but which he called to a shark. And like any family, it was always hard to see people go. You know, anytime anybody actually left the company, it felt a seismic event. You didn't see any reason why somebody would leave Ponds and go somewhere else. It was a unique culture. But today is not about mourning a loss, but about celebrating a life. And I'm going to be indulgent and take you down, as the cliche goes, on a meandering walk down some memory lane. We, and as we all know, went to Loyola College in Madras. At that time, though not in the same year, there were actually three Narayanans. Actually, one Narayan and two Narayans and one Narayan. V Narayanan, who was an IAS officer, his father was also like Mr. Narayanan's father, an ICS officer. J. Narayan, some of you may know from ITC and then Shawwalas. And confusingly, all three were known as Nari. So you can only imagine what it would have done to the heads of those Cheeseborough Ponds people who really struggled to understand what his name actually was. Frequently, we receive correspondence addressed to Nari Narayanan, or as the Americans say, I can't quite do the accent, Narayanan, or something of that nature. They genuinely didn't know what his real name was. It didn't matter. One of his colleagues at college, V Narayanan, actually said he recollected that VN was very welcoming and nice to him, despite being several years his senior. No surprises there, and a harbinger of things to come. VN regularly played tennis, as all of us know, and he's also very fond of cricket. Maybe that had something to do with the fact that we always used to take a banner advertising Ponds Dreamflower out for the Madras Test match. Often, the banner would be behind the bowler's arm at one end. I remember in the summer of 1990, he and I found ourselves in London one afternoon, and we'd finished all our meetings, and we spent a fine afternoon in the sunshine watching an Indian team collapse and lose a test match. though we did enjoy a young lad named Sachin Tendulkar score some magnificent boundaries. Wayne once told me a story of how cricket played a part in his early career in Unilever, or Lever Brothers, as I think it might have been known in those days. Wayne was one of the early cross postings from Lever Brothers India to UK. This was at a time when many in the company, and possibly English society more generally, still retained aspects of colonial and imperial attitudes towards Indians and Indians. It was easy to be treated, I imagine, and feel like an outsider or an imposter, somebody who didn't belong. And then one day it all changed for Mr. Narayanan. This is how it happened. There was a last-minute withdrawal in a company cricket match, and Wayne was asked to fill in. He did. He scored a century. He was never treated the same way ever again. But prowess on the cricket field was not the only reason he was held in high esteem in Lever later and then. On another occasion, Wayne recounted to me how, as a brand manager in the UK, came up with the idea of correlating Persil, the detergent, sales with water hardness across the UK. As a result of his analysis, there was a region-specific reformulation and relaunching of the detergent, which I think still continues today. He made a lasting impression on Unilever. Many of us are from Ponds and we know the impression he made on us, but he made an equally lasting impression on Unilever. And in later years, I came across so many people who were former Lever Brothers employees who knew and recognized and were in awe of his abilities. And of course, it culminated him being appointed as a director of Hindustan Lever. Ravichandran mentioned that presentation in 1981. In the summer of 1981, he traveled as the chairman and managing director of Ponds to make a presentation to the board of Cheeseborough Ponds. It's perhaps the most important presentation he ever made, and one that I think set the company firmly on an envisaged path. 40 years old since that presentation, and I still remember the first 3 slides in which he demonstrated to Ralph Ward and his lieutenants how, and these are the exact words he used, in the 3 years since Ponds India was established, the new company has sold more and earned more than in the previous 30 years. BN being BN gave credit for this success to, again I quote, and this is from memory, but I'm sure these are the right words, to the bold and visionary decision made by the board of CP Inc. to dilute equity. He then went out to set out a business strategy for the company. That presentation was a tour de force. It proved to be irresistible. Later on, he told me that after he finished, there was stunned silence for a minute in the boardroom of CP Inc. And then applause broke out. One of the vice presidents asked him for a copy of his speaking notes. Think about it. A tiny little subsidiary in India proposing to do what no other subsidiary of CP Inc. anywhere in the world would have thought of or even dared to think of, to strike out on their own in new businesses. He returned to India with an approval to embark on a path that completely transformed the fledgling company and led to the many businesses that were established in the years to come. Wayne was the ultimate strategic thinker. Very earlier on, he said, he didn't agree with Igor Ansoff and the powers that be, that the gurus of business strategy of those days, that the key strategic question was what business are we in? Instead, Wayne argued, what is more important is how good a business are we in? He then took this thinking further. He asked, what does being good for a company making and selling cosmetics in India mean? He answered by stating that the aim of this company, strategic decisions, would be to, again, I quote his words, generate employment and earn foreign exchange. And there you go. Brilliantly encapsulated in 6 words was a statement of strategic intent, a business plan, and a roadmap for the future. I could go on, have many more memories to share, but I will finish with a joke that I remember Wayne told one of our foreign visitors. It might have been Bill Schmidt or Ennio Perugni, I can't remember. As he told it, the leader of the Soviet Union, it might have been Khrushchev, was visiting the US, and in the White House spotted a red telephone. That he asked. It's a hotline to hell, was the answer. Intrigued, Khrushchev asked if he could pick price. Sure, go ahead, said the American president. Khrushchev picked it up, asked to speak to Stalin, was connected immediately, and he spoke to a few minutes and hung up, and he asked how much it cost, and the operator said $10,000. Khrushchev said, that's fine, but this is a wonderful phone. Can I borrow it and take it back to the Kremlin? And so the American president said yes. So Khrushchev goes back to Kremlin with the phone, excitedly calls all the Politburo to his office, and they call Stalin and Ivan the Terrible and Peter the Great and all the others in hell, have a long conversation, and finally hang up. And then Khrushchev goes to the operator and says, how much did that call cost? And Mr. Narayanan provides the answer, 1 ruble. It's a local call. Mr. Narayanan was probably the smartest person I've ever met, the most inspiring leader. It was a privilege to have been associated with him. Thank you for this opportunity to share some memories. And I look forward to hearing the memories of everyone else on this call.
Thank you, MS. And, good night whenever you want to sleep. Pandit, can you come on?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. It's very difficult to condense memories of 18 years and learnings of that have lasted a lifetime into just 10 minutes. I'll try to be brief, but pardon me if I'm rambling along. And what I'm going to talk about are the leadership and management lessons that I learned, and I think something every leader, every manager could learn. And I learned it from VN. Let me start right at the beginning. And I joined as a management trainee in 1975. And at that time, VN was the marketing manager, and he used to sit in a corner room on the floor. Next room was RTs, and next room was the brand room, which I shared with Niku and Sundaram beginning, and later Ravi moved in. So in those days, VN took a great interest. And, you know, as they say, the first 5 years of a child is the most formative years. And I think those initial years of your work life are the most impressionable and formative years in your work life. I remember the initial few months were sales tours, and I did my first tour of Karnataka, and you were expected to write a sales report, and VN would make meticulous notes on the margins, and the report would come back to you. And a couple of days later, he called me over to his room for a chat. So the questions were all about, where does the salesperson live? What is his family like? How many children does he have? Where do they study? So virtually for most of them, I had a blank answer. So he came back. Next tour was Andhra tour. And this time I said, I'm going to learn everything about the salesperson. And submitted a report, again called for a meeting. So I knew everything about salespersons in Andhra Pradesh, but this time all the questions were about the ADs. What is his investment? What other lines does he have? When did he start his business? So completely out of syllabus questions. So the training he imparted was through these very incisive probing questions. And much later I realized this is what coaching and mentoring is all about. You're not told you go and look for this, go and look for that, and go and look for that. But by stimulating, asking powerful questions, you stimulate the individual's thinking. And also develop a sense of curiosity. So coaching, mentoring, and having a sense of curiosity are very powerful leadership qualities. And the second part of the training was preparing his presentations. And you heard from Sita and Ravi and MS, those days, whether it was an address to the MMA, Advertising Club of India, or a presentation to Chisbro Ponds executives, he would ask us to work on his presentation. And that was his way of developing in us how to structure your thoughts, how to structure your ideas, how to present them very effectively. And listening to him making those presentations, you realized how communication is such an important aspect of leadership. And today, it's all well recognized that leaders are good leaders, those who have a very powerful communication, one-on-one as well as in a group. And the third aspect, which stays with me even today, is meetings with advertising agencies. And I recall that both Lintas and HDA used to, the CEOs, the chairman, along with the whole retinue of managers used to come and sit through the presentations. And once Subhash Ghoshal, the chairman of HDA, told me, I brought in all my branch managers because I want them to learn from these meetings. I want them to see how VN handles these meetings. It was a great learning experience. And those learnings of the initial years have stayed on. There was a time in my late 20s and 30s, I was sometimes impatient, saying, why are we not making these changes faster? Why are we not making these moves quickly? Later on, reflecting back, I realized that was because VN had a deep sense of judgment on people. And he had a great sense of empathy and towards employees who had stayed long in the organization and employees who were sincere to the organization. He did not want to disrupt and dislocate them in any manner whatsoever. So he had a deep people sense, which again has stood through me in my years later on. Ponds was a culture where dignity and respect for the individual, whether you're an office attendant bringing you coffee, tea, or whether you're a vice president or a factory worker, that was a hallmark of our organization. Dignity and respect for the individual. And today, some of the great organizations are recognizing that's such a key aspect of leadership. VN was well known for his delegation capabilities to delegate and trust people. And I had a personal experience. I was reporting to him directly between 1988 to 1990, 1991 as head of sales and marketing. And when I took over that role, our PP business was in a difficult situation with a huge failure of the Pond's toothpaste and tooth powder launch. All he told me was, Pandit, it's in your hands. Bring the business back to health. That's it. He did not ask me for an action plan. Any other leader would have jumped in, asked for, give me a roadmap, give me an action plan, give me a weekly monitoring of how you are progressing. Not once. I would send him a monthly note on where we are. He would appreciate it in his typical handwritten notes saying, great work, go on. That's it. He left it completely to me to handle it. And he strongly believed it. So let me conclude by saying that the values and the leadership competencies that I developed early on in Ponds and over those 18 years stayed with me in various leadership positions for the next 25 years. So if I have passed this on to younger generation of leaders, I think I would have just done justice to his legacy. And through those leaders, his legacy is perpetuated. Thank you.
Thank you, Pandit. Next is Ravi Shankar. Eki has come on. Ravi, can I ask Eki whether he wants to speak?
Let me first listen to a few people.
Okay, all right. Yeah. Ravi Shankar. Please unmute.
Am I audible now?
Yeah.
So thank you very much, sir, for giving me the opportunity to be present today in this very, very memorable event. VN, the most charismatic and positive person I have ever met in my life.
Yes.
And the man with a golden voice never talks on a demotivating way to anyone.
Never, never.
People come out of his room after a brief meeting with him, fully charged, fully motivated, with a lot of positive energy. When we go in, we would be very anxious to meet him. But when we come out very positively from that meeting. Even at this stage, I remember what is positivity, because of this pandemic period, positivity is the thing which can keep us moving. But we have never seen such a person in my life who was full of positivity. He never ever spoke negative about anyone or anything. This is my experience. People will die to do anything for him. If he calls somebody at the lowest level, he is totally non-bureaucratic. He will call the lowest person if a particular thing has to happen, and that person will do anything for him. So this is the kind of personality, the charismatic leader. The second major observation I had is concern for every employee. It was visible on day one when I joined. When I joined, he crafted my 7-day induction program. They used to call it as an induction program those days. He personally handcrafted my integration program. And the 7 days, first day he made sure, Ravi, you have to go and sell 1 dozen of deep level talc in Ennore. Then you will know what does it mean to sell a dozen of talc for that salesman to sell. The first day was that. The second day, he asked me to sit in front of every person in the hall who were finance division clerical cadre people. And at the end of the day, he saw me sitting with one very notorious person and chatting for about 1 hour. And he called me to his room at the end of the day and said, what did you talk with him? Do you know about his family? That's exactly what Pandit was saying. How many children he has got. So he just indirectly hinted to me that you should know the person, but not get into his culture. So he was a little bit concerned about cultural aspects of gossip. So he indirectly gave me a hint that don't fall for that, but try to understand that personality better. So this is the big learning at the end of the second day he gave me. So later he crafted my entire career in bonds. Even though I was a little distant from him, but he was keeping every manager in his mind while he was crafting their career plan. I was sitting in the factory as a plant accountant, and suddenly I get a call from Mr. Vishwanathan saying that you have to go to Kandla for setting up the unit in Kandla. So I was taken aback, a plant accountant becoming a plant manager. So I asked Mr. Ravi that what kind of credentials I have to be a plant manager. Then he said, no, go and meet Mr. Narayanan, he will tell you. First thing he said was that, Ravi, I made this decision mainly because I know that if I put a person to a swimming pool, he will know how to swim. So I don't have any hesitation that you will do a good job. And this is what, coming back to Pandit's point of trust. The moment he believes in a person's integrity and his competence, completely delegates, and the trust carries the performance because you are totally committed behind him. Now, I have seen Mr. Narayanan as a great strategist. And one aspect which I would like to highlight is the corporate governance. He was the epitome of corporate governance. Mr. Balraman knows very well that he follows both the letter and the spirit of the law. And he never ever made anything extra profitability by bending the law. He will never take a decision. He will be very conservative, ultra conservative in making sure whatever profitability we make is due under the law as well as the spirit of the law. So this is something which phenomenally carried. And the entire the valuation of the company. He used to call me subsequently after quite a few years. I met him in Ernst & Young. He called me, Ravi, I want to come and see Ernst & Young one day. And he came. It was a big office in Senator Road, very nearby his house. He had come prepared for that meeting fully, and he was narrating clearly what kind of market capitalization of all the companies where he is on the board. He gave a number of 200,000 crores. And he was saying that he had carried an article published about him, that he is a #1 independent director in India, and by virtue of the market capitalization of those companies in which he is on the board, fully prepared for the meeting in Ernst & Young. So and if you may all recall that bond shares were listed at 20 rupees, but it grew up to 1,500 rupees over a period of 7 years. And every household were able to conduct the marriage of their children when they had originally invested the money in bond shares. This is the kind of love for entire stakeholders, whether it is a peon who is working in secretarial division, or the largest shareholder, Cheesebro Ponds, or the ordinary shareholder. And his objective is every year show 25 to 30% year-on-year growth. He will never compromise it. Even if one business division doesn't deliver it, he will call me, Ravi, what is the gap? And he will immediately call Janus Marcoon or somebody in Geneva and make sure that he will plan ahead that kind of additional profits be executed during the year. This is the kind of person who was keeping the interest of shareholders in mind. That is why the market capitalization, Ponds was the #1 cosmetic company in India with market capitalization those days. Now, I want to come to VN's as a human being. Somebody also mentioned about it as a human being. When my deaf and dumb sister got married to another deaf and dumb person, he came to know because there was an article in Tamil magazine that was basically in the front page itself, the cover page. So he didn't know about this particular facet of my personal life. I was only a junior manager at the time. He called me, Ravi, what is this? Can you narrate this entire story? How it happened? So he was spending at least half an hour with me, understanding my family and why my sister was not talking and all that. So that is one thing. And even recently, I used to meet him in the temples. And whenever I used to meet him in temples, I used to be charged again like what I used to be as a management trainee. I used to be full of enthusiasm. My wife will be also with me. My wife also got into him. My wife used to say, a man with a golden voice to everybody. So he was saying that, there was a common friend who had a miracle in income tax assessment. And the common friend had told me about this instance. And he used to also be as an internal auditor of the companies in which Mr. Narayanan was on the board. Many companies in Chennai, this person is also internal auditor, and he is totally taken in by his competence and the kind of, he was saying that day that, but for him, I would not have been the best internal auditor as of today. But he had a miracle in income tax department, and he had told me, Mr. Narayanan said, Ravi, in the temple in front of the Shivalinga, he was saying, Ravi, you know what happened to Sri Ram? Yes, sir, I know that. I heard about that miracle. Then that was the last word he spoke to me. That was 1 year ago, before the pandemic. Avan Andri Edum Asayad. He was telling it in Tamil, and he was seeing the God, and he was saying, nothing moves in this world without his will. This is the word he used. And I came back, and even today, it is a prophetic word. The whole pandemic and the kind of distress which we are all going through, this is the word which I keep reminding me again and again, that nothing moves in this world without his will. This is what I want to say, and my learnings with him. And he has been a God to me. I never treat God and Guru differently. He is my God. Thank you very much.
Most well said, Ravi. We all agree with you totally. And Nandu is remarkable in his enthusiasm, should come and speak. Though I do not know whether he really worked with Mr. Narayanan.
Thank you, Mr. Bibi, and thank you for all the speakers before me. I learned so much about Mr. VN listening to you. You're right. My association with him was very brief, starting from when I was a summer trainee in 1981 to when I joined in 1982, and I was 18 months in the head office. And it was remarkable, even as a summer trainee, he had time to sit through my reports and presentations and comment in great detail to help us develop. In subsequent times, I saw him at close quarters during presentations, meetings, sales conferences, the speeches that Sita mentioned earlier, including the one on the census of 1981, which I still have a copy of in the cupboard behind me, because it was so well laid out. He left a deep impression on me, although our association was brief. And the last time I met him was in 1983, so that's 37 years ago. He was, you know, so I'll be very brief, therefore. His deep understanding of business, his care for people, compassion, all of which came together as wisdom and charisma, which is how we felt it. And you've all talked about his communication, his attention to detail, his care for people. You know, many years later, Jim Collins talked about the concept of level 5 leadership. And I believe Mr. Narayanan, Mr. VN, describes that extremely well. He had a steely determination, business understanding, together with a great emphasis and focus on building people, building the organization, building the culture. And that's why we are all here, because in some way he has touched all of us as people, as managers, and as leaders. So the culture, Sitaram mentioned, the culture of character and competence. Throughout my working life outside of Ponds, and I've been working in India and outside, Mr. VN has always been my inspiration and my role model of what this role model of a leader should be. Many is the time I've had difficult situations, and a little bit like Ekalavya and Dronacharya, I've said to myself, what would Mr. VN do in a situation like this? And that has helped guide my thinking. It was for me a great thing when you invited me to rejoin the Ponds family. It is one of my greatest regrets that I did not, in fact, reconnect with him in the last 37 years and say thank you. So I just wanted these 2 or 3 minutes to say that through you to him and his family. We will remember him. He will live on in our memories, but more importantly, he will live on through us as leaders, and as Mr. Pandit mentioned, the people who we have influenced around the world. And that leadership model fundamentally comes from Mr. VN. So his legacy will live on. Thank you.
Do you all recognize that our leadership series is our Guru Dakshina to him? I wrote to him and he wrote back. He actually dictated it to N. Shankar, secretary, who said Mr. Narayanan dictated this on the phone. And this letter is unsigned. So he said, look, I'm very happy you are doing it. And, I will not be able to listen, but can you send me hard copies of articles? I sent some, the first is 5-6 to his house some time ago. In fact, Mr. Narayanan was learning all the time, whether you met him in his room or whether you traveled with him on a car to Pondicherry or whether you traveled with him in a train to Kodaikanal. Wherever you spent a little time with him, he taught you both by example and also by asking questions, ever being curious but never being offensive. Amazing individual, amazing individual. Next, I think is Atul.
Yep.
Uh,
Thank you.
Atul again is someone who had spent a lot of time with Mr. Narayanan. Atul is someone again Mr. Narayanan valued very highly. So Atul, I'm sure you
Thank
have
you.
lots of very, very high value experiences to share.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Balraman. And first of all, I want to address Mrs. Narayanan, Aarti, and Ashwini. You have our sincere condolences. Thank you for sharing Mr. Narayanan with us. And today we share our thoughts. I'm getting a little emotional, so I'm going to try and make this filmy rather than get it emotional. I was actually with Pons only 7 years, but it feels like 7 lifetimes in a positive way because it's stayed with me. I tried to um, crystallize what I believe he meant. There's some echo if someone can mute. What he meant or he left behind as a legacy forever. And to me, it was the fact that he epitomized empathy, being engaging, and excellence, tried to keep it to a theme like he would. Empathy, first of all, we've all talked about it. He truly sensed what consumers, distributors, shareholders wanted. But my experiences before and after leaving Ponds, or in Ponds and after leaving Ponds, was the empathy of understanding what we needed, like a father. It started from way back when I joined Ponds. Um, I started at a princely salary of 1,100 rupees, and that was a good salary back then. But some 8 months later, I was getting married to my high school sweetheart Ritika, and we were worried about how we would manage. We never had to ask for anything. My salary was doubled before I even got married. And I have many stories of empathy, but the ones that stick with me are we were coming back from the factory one day when Mr. Narayanan made a detour to visit the family of one of the cleaners who was bereaved. Someone talked earlier about how he cut through barriers of class and age and just made himself one with everyone. And it was, to me, it was then and today the hallmark of the humility and respect that he had for everyone, and he modeled for us all. The empathy continued even after, and I want to recall an incident Mrs. Narayanan might remember. We were visiting Madras many years after we'd left Ponds, and we met at the hotel where we had a conference, Trident. Ritika was with me, and because we were on a business trip, she only had Western clothes, and she said, "Look, I feel bad that I'm in Madras. I'm just wearing a dress." And next morning, Mrs. Narayanan sent her a beautiful silk sari. Empathy ran in the family. So I want to move from empathy and in keeping with the time limit, because I could go on empathy for all of my time, to his next great virtue and strength that he left for all of us. And that was how engaging he was. When his big eyes locked, you knew he was engaged. They talk about people who have this uncanny ability to go deep one on one as if you're the only one in the world. And that was his. And I could see that ability not just with us, but also with the suppliers and vendors we had. I mean, it's amazing. Someone talked earlier about, I think Pandit talked about, or Ravi talked about how the heads of the agencies, I recall several meetings with Subhash Ghoshal, Ram Ray, Alec, Chandru of OBM, and I know Mrs. Chandrasekhar might also be on the call, Kittu of Metal Box. I mean, it was like a magnificent jugalbandi. These were not suppliers to us. These were partners in the truest sense. And the deep respect and affection they had for VN just came shining through. And it's unquestionable that we punched far more than our weight just because we got the best brains working in sync for us. And they did that because they liked, respected, and trusted VN. And that's another learning that has stayed with me. He would say, in any relationship, you start by liking them, then you go to respect them, and finally trust. So even though we were far apart in age and stature, I feel very privileged that I hope I had such a relationship with him. And as I said, we were together for a short 7 years in which I was away in sales for half the time. But over the years, we stayed in touch, not as often as I'd like. And I felt close enough to call him, for instance, when I left and I was working at American Express, and I said, "Sir, may I poach Kanan?" Because I hired Kanan away from Ponds. And he was obviously very graceful. But just the last time we saw him, we visited Mr. and Mrs. Narayanan in their Cenotaph Road house, and we were talking about the Krishna conscious path that my wife and I are now trying to follow. And Mrs. Narayanan pointed immediately to a small Radha Krishna statue in their living area and recalled that many years ago we had gifted it to them. This is the kind of genuine love and engagement that both Mr. and Mrs. Narayanan felt for all. It was not made up, it was not superficial, it was deep, authentic, and genuine. And as I say, that's what stays with me. And my final tribute to him is around excellence. Again, so much has been written or said, but he had an unbroken record in our industry of profitable growth. He was entrepreneurial before the term became fashionable, finding ways to what we now call address or expand the TAM, the total addressable market, with Russian exports, shoes, thermometers, whatever else. But his greatest mark of excellence, in my mind and the minds clearly of everyone in this call, was the investment in people. We went toe to toe with the best in India, got top talent year after year. He got the best and made them better by creating the culture of character and competence. And you know, this came through not in words, but in the way we behaved and modeled behavior for others. I recall early on, he said to MS and me, "You're not in competition with each other. Your goal is to make yourself redundant in your job." That's so different from most other companies where it's a two-horse race from the moment people join. So this kind of best people in a nurturing environment made for excellence every day. And I just recall whenever VN called or walked in, as he would often, directly into the band room, it was electrifying. I think Ravi Shankar said accurately, there was a little anxiety, but the excitement of learning. And when he left, it was almost like we'd had a mini MBA in those few minutes. He modeled skills and behavior, input and output, but most important for me personally, material and spiritual progress. His office was built in with a temple, and that has been my ideal since. And so, as we say goodbye to him today, the only words that come to me are the lyrics of To Serve with Love. How can we thank someone who has figuratively taken us from crayons to perfumes? It isn't easy, and I'm not going to sing, but I will try. To serve with love. Om Shanti.
Thank you, Atul. He is still with us. He is with us in the way he has trained us, in the characters he has instilled in us, and in all the goals that we carry in his name forward. And I think Candy had got up very early in the morning to be here and to speak about Mr. Narayanan. And Candy is again someone who had worked closely with him. Candy, may I invite you to share your thoughts?
Thank you, Baram. It is indeed difficult, and it was quite a shock when we heard about Mr. Vian's passing away. It brought back a lot of memories, a lot of the things that happened, and the way he kind of guided and molded certainly me. It also brought back, in a way, like what Nandu said, wish I had spent even more time. Wish I had gone back and met him more often. And, for me, it was, as many of you know, my dad passed away on 4th of January, and this happened like a few weeks later. It was like, on one hand, kind of my father who kind of guided me in my early life, and then kind of my father who guided me in my professional life, kind of both passed away in the same month. And it made me reflective, it made me think, and certainly something that for me is personally very emotional. So, obviously a lot of things have going to be the same kind of experiences that all of you have already mentioned. I first met Mr. VN actually along with Deepak Chandani when we started our summer job together in 1979, actually with Atul and MS as our guides. And we were, 20, 21 years old at that time. And obviously, we were highly ambitious, thought a lot of ourselves. And it was a very interesting experience because suddenly you met a leader who was so impressive. We met him twice, once when we joined and once before we kind of left our summer training. And at the same time was so interested in you, had tremendous amount of humility, didn't tell us what to do, told us how to think by asking questions. And it just went back. I mean, as soon as I left in the summer of 79, I knew this was the company I was going to join, right? I knew that immediately. It didn't, take me a lot of time to make that decision. It was obvious. And it was because of these meetings I had with VN. Then I joined in 1980, and I was mostly in sales, but luckily in Madras, in Chennai. So therefore I met him quite frequently. And I was there between 1980 to 1990, or 10 years, doing various I was in sales, but I met him very frequently, whether it was on travels to the market, visiting distributors, meeting him in the office, talking to Sita. Actually, he mentioned about all the speeches he wrote. I was very envious of Sita in those years because of the time he was able to spend with Narayan. And he and Sita and I used to talk about it. And so I learned a lot secondhand as well through Sita. At the same time, somewhat envious, but also learning a lot. He was influential on me in a number of ways, and I'll come to that in a minute, but he was also influential in the way I would say I tried to be a leader to a lot of the people, right? Because Pons was this kind of a machine of getting this top class talent coming in, and lots of them used to come through sales and typically through South region. And so I interacted with a lot of people over the years, and I tried to, in a way, imitate him. I never could, but at least I was inspired, and I was trying to be like the way I think I saw Mr. VN lead. In 1986, 87, when the levers takeover happened, I think he was extremely helpful. Sita spoke about the lunch we had in Connemara with Keki and the way he positioned us for success within levers was tremendous. I moved over to levers in 1990 as branch manager in South, along soon to be joined by PKV, who can see on the call as well. And we used to often talk, PKV and I, about VN, right? Because we were in levers now, and we would often talk about how can we bring that culture into levers. And we tried very hard to bring that within at least the South region in the branch, treating people the same way, trying to create the same kind of culture. I left levers in 97, and between 93 and 97, I was in Mumbai in marketing manager in detergents. I met him when I came to Chennai. I used to often say hello to him. After 97, I left India. I think I met him two, three times after that. A couple of times in Madras Cricket Club, when I used to go back to Chennai and try and meet friends. Always the same, even if he was in shorts and no top, having a drink in the locker room in Madras. His voice, his speech, the way he would address me was still the same, without his tie and suit and everything else. And my respect for him remains the same. And when I told about this to Radhika, Radhika felt really, really sad as well, because she knows how much he helped us during our early marriage years, how he formed the way I was a professional. There are two aspects. One is kind of how we built kind of the business model that many of us have tried to emulate. I have tried very hard to be what I call really think about breakthrough and being aspirational. Clearly that came before these words were management jargon, came from VN, to really shoot for the moon, think about what that would take to get there. This culture, which many of you have spoken about, of character and competence. Even when I joined Coca-Cola, and I kind of got into senior positions, I used to think very hard about, does this person have the character first, before anything else? And the way in the case of Coke, we used to say is, does he have Coke flowing through the veins of blood? So it was that if you have that character, then everything else comes, and everything else you can, you can then build. And then treating people with that trust, with the respect, with empathy, and delegating enormous tasks on people and trusting them. So that's pretty much been kind of the business model that I've tried to follow. None of this was original. It all came from VN. And as Nandu, you mentioned, if you look at good to great, in a way you could say, well, we were following that well before, right? Because we saw that role model in Mr. VN. Certainly, as a man, as a person, he was a tremendous thinker, deeply strategic, right? He wasn't, he didn't think through only things that'll happen. We spoke about just now, about how we used to get all these senior leaders on our side as stakeholders. This concept of stakeholder management, now again, back in fashion. This was what we were doing 40 years ago, right, in bonds. And that's kind of the far side and the strategic thinking that VN had. As a person, very human, very humble. At the same time, what I really remember about him more than anything else, Ravi, you talked about the golden voice. I always remember not just motivating me, but inspiring me. It wasn't just telling me, you're motivated to do this task. No, he inspired me to be a better person, a better manager, to lead. It was truly inspirational. And that's the kind of person I was. I missed this initial question, Balram, on this God or Guru. I missed it because I came a few minutes late. I was having difficulty in getting into Zoom. No, not because I didn't get up. It was because I was difficulty in getting in on the Zoom call.
Okay.
And, there's a quote, it's by a Christian saint, who says, be who God meant you to be, and you will set the world on fire. And I think it's not about his being God or guru. I think he was what God meant him to be, and he set the world on fire, not only for the people he met, like all of us, certainly he did for us, but through us, and I think Pandit, you mentioned this, through us, I think we've been able to try to do a fraction of that to others. And I think that's how his legacy goes far, far, far beyond ponds, far, far, far beyond this group of people. And he certainly from my perspective, set the world on fire. I'll remember him a lot. I really, again, wish my heartfelt prayers to Mrs. Narayanan, the family, and for him and his soul. Thank you, Balaram, for organizing this.
No, not at all. I was, in some context, I was telling him that we owe Mother India a lot. She has given us everything, so we have to give back to India. He corrected me. He said, no, Balu, you owe it to the world. Think of the world, not just India, he said. So there were a number of occasions he gave us many of these nuggets of wisdom. He was generous. He was generous beyond anyone else I know. I mean, long ago, he called me and said, why haven't you bought a house? I had not thought of buying a house. He said, go ahead and buy. You want money? I said, I guess. He said, we have a loan limit of 2 lakhs. You take 10 lakhs, he said. I didn't know what to do. So I just came back to the factory. I was doing my work. About a month later, he called me and he was very upset. He said, why have you not done anything about buying a house? He was upset I had not taken a housing loan. So immediately the next week, I worked very hard and bought a house. So, I mean, Mr. Narayanan was very different in many, many ways. And now we have someone who worked shoulder to shoulder with him in the most difficult of all the challenges that he met. That is in Indianization of ponds and then forming Ponds India Limited. We are most lucky to have Eki Shirsagar here. Eki is someone whom we value as an elder, as part of our board, which set our policies, principles, value systems, goals, and ambitions. Eki, most happy to have you.
Well, it's a pity that we are meeting under these circumstances. One of the reasons, Malu, that I said I'll wait until I hear the others is that these are all faces who they may recognize me, but they're older, but I can recognize most of them. I think you're absolutely right. I was going to say that my first time I met Mr. V and Nari, as I call them, was in 1975. And it was in their brand new office. What's the name of that building? Fabun Mansions, right?
Yep.
Yes.
And you're right, Mr. Mani. Most of you may have heard of him. He was the founder chairman.
Yes.
And that office, I mean, my appointment as Ferguson's, I went to meet them to give a look at them and submit a proposal. And I was told I have to meet Mr. Mani. So I met Mr. Mani, and he spent a few minutes talking to me and coffee and all that. And then he said, look, I think you should really meet Mr. Narayanan. So Nari walks in. And from then onwards, I think that is 1975, early 75. We worked very closely together. You're absolutely right. I'll go with the full circuit just now. I should have come later. 1975, I was there at the Indianization of a branch of Cheeseborough Ponds, which was in itself quite an effort. And convincing not really the authorities anywhere, but convincing Cheeseborough Ponds Balu, did you ever meet a man called Rolf Rosehausen?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I must tell you the story. I know it's a memorial, but still, this gentleman came, a typical Midwest American, large, with 3 huge suitcases and checked in the Connemara. So I was told.
Water, yes.
No, not only water. He got breakfast cereals and something else and something else. So next day, Nari was very gentle with him as he was. I was never gentle. So I said, what are you doing? Are you going to feed us all? He said, no, I was told there's nothing available in this country. And I said, well, you've seen the results of these reports in India. Yeah, that's why we're very sad that we have to give away, 60%. Anyway, so from then we worked together, and then I was there for the birth of the company. And I don't think any of you were there when in the room when we spent endless hours. We used to spend all day going through you said not only the spirit, not only the law, but also the letter, but the spirit. And the question came, we had to say it is Ponds India Limited. Then the question was, should be with brackets, without brackets? Believe it or not.
I remember that, yeah.
Right? And the reason why was that the marketing people said you can't have brackets on a container, or anywhere else for a consumer product. And Nadi listened to us, and from one side I said, look here, one could talk to the registrar and say, give examples of Hindustan lever. It doesn't say India, various other things, with brackets, without. And exactly what Pandit said, I think, saying that, look, let's stick to the letter this time and the spirit. This is what they want. We lose nothing. And he told the marketing guys, he said, look, this is your job. Get people to forget the Ponds India Limited. Think of the brand. That's what your task should be. The next task was forming the company, which is when I introduced 2 of my friends. I hope, Chaitan Manyar and Dilip Udeshi. Chaitan did all the legal work, everything. I helped him with that, of course. And Dilip, the legal side, and his calm, he's still very calm and, forceful in his own way. And we worked. And of course, the great Mr. V Ramachandran, late, the tax expert. Some of you may have met him. Ravi must have met him anyway.
All of us know him. Yeah.
Sorry?
All of us know him, yeah.
No, he was a tax and lawyer, but, So it was quite a team. And then, as you said, forming a team of your suppliers as well. The auditor, we had the great Mr. Narayalwala as the auditor of Patli Boy. He was a grand man. He was a president of the institute. And his people used to ask him, he used to say, why do you go and spend 3 days for the Ponds? It's a small company. He said, no, I'm learning all the time. Look at, we have our audit meetings, our board meetings, really, it's fantastic. And he paid us all compliments on that. Therefore, coming back to this, he not only touched the advertising, but also us who are not in the marketing field. But I found that here he was he was very direct, very helpful. When we went to get the approval, we had to get approvals from the control of capital issues. There's a problem with the pricing. And at one stage, we said, I'm not, the Americans said, no, we want more. The guy said, no, you can't get more. He said, then we'll pack up. He said, fine, pack up. So I said, I had to calm people. We both had to calm the Americans down. But later, anyway, that's another story. I won't go into that. But I think what I find is, someone made the point, all of you made the point, corporate governance, long before the phrase became a cliche, we did that. Nari actually made sure that our board meetings were genuine board meetings. As I said, it would last for 2 days. I remember a whole lot of people would ask me, and Chetan and Dilip, that how can you spend 2 days at a board meeting? Exactly like Mr. Nandal Bala, we said, well, we enjoy it, you know. And we did not only have the board meeting and then an evening dinner, it was all great fun. So I think what I feel again when people talk about corporate governance and the way things, we were doing in ponds 40 years ago at the board level, exactly what now SEBI is asking a whole lot of people to do. Now, you can say, how is that? Because of the man. Someone else would have said, look, come on, let's just get on with it. These are all rigmarole. You don't need to follow it. And I think that's something which is left, for me, an indelible impression, which is no matter what, spirit and letter of the law is important. And if all of you have done well, I think this is the other important point, that I think every one of you who are in the company or left the company appear to have done brilliantly. All are heads of their companies or were heads of their companies or CEOs or some equivalent. And you still have, I think all of you believe that this is where it all started. And now I think those who knew Nari would say, actually, the man who inspired him in as far as this kind of thing was concerned was P.L. Prakash Tandon, of the first Indian chairman of Hindustan Lever, which Tandon did what I think Nari tried to do and succeeded better, of creating a pool of people, taking young people, making them excellent managers. I could go on, but I think I don't think you really want to listen to me on this. If somebody is ever writing history of Ponds India, I'd be very happy to spend time with them, because I think I was perhaps unique in that I was there at the birth, the Upanayinam, that is going to public issue, and then the marriage, when we married, it was marriage, somewhat of a forced marriage. In the Sun Lever, I know this is being recorded, but I don't think my friends at Levers will object.
That's okay. That's okay. We joke with them, yeah.
No, I know them all. I used to. Now I don't know any of them. But I think therefore, in fact, I acted on behalf of Ponds when the pricing of the merger was being done. So someone asked me, hey, but you can't be on both sides. Right now I'm on this side. After this merger is done, I disappear from that side because I have to, because our firm's there. I said, why are you fighting so hard? I said, well, why not? Who's doing it? Well, anyway, that's all academic. I think I used to spend a lot of time with him, and then for the last many years, we haven't. And I'll end by saying again, it's somewhat appropriate, Balu, that you organize this thing today. As somebody said, the Madras Cricket Club, where I've spent many evenings with him, would be today. I mean, the weekend of the Chepauk Test. I mean, he wouldn't have left that stadium. And he used to be in that pavilion with all his friends. I think, therefore, we have done him a great honor and done ourselves an even bigger honor in remembering him. My condolences, of course, to his family, and not only his wife, Indu, and his daughters, but all the extended Ponds family, which includes all of us sitting here memorializing him. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eki. Thank you. We have some time. Does anybody else want to say something? Deepak Chandani, P.K. Viswanathan.
Mr. Bhatt. Mr. Bhatt can.
Mr. Bhatt, yeah. Mr. Bhatt.
So, Balram, I'll just say hello to everybody. This is Deepak here. I do remember VN with a lot of fondness, running Delhi after Atul moved on from Ponds and then getting involved with the whole Russian deal. And he's explaining to me how the ethics of the individual are different and must always be ahead of what all you have to do in business, because dealing with the Russians had its own side effects, so to say. So I still remember many learnings, but this one stayed with me, where he told me that it's very important that my ethics are ethics that I can live with, even though I see around me so many things which I wouldn't want to emulate. So just with that, and also to say thank you for organizing this. It's indeed also a place where one's been able to see old well-remembered and well-loved faces. So thank you for that, and sincere condolences to the family. Thank you.
Thank you, Deepak. TV, do you have anything to share?
I have something to share.
Yes, Mr. Bhatt, we'll come to you. Yeah.
Sorry.
Why don't we allow Mr. Bhatt to go ahead?
No, I'm not in a hurry. I'm not in a hurry. That's what I mean. Please go ahead.
But you are a guest, so PKV is part of us. So.
I'll wait for Mr. Bhatt. He's my guru.
Yeah,
No.
yeah. Mr. Bhatt.
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Bhatt has been Mr. Narayanan's personal auditor for a very long time. So.
It's the great sense of loss which I want to share. Recently, I mean, he was in constant touch with me in connection with his tax matters during the period prior to his sudden passing away. So it's all the more difficult for me to accept the turn of events. He was a thorough gentleman. He was a gentleman to the core. He believed in perfection in whatever he did. He was very particular that all facts are properly reported and taxes duly paid in time. He also kept himself abreast of the latest developments on tax issues, which could help proper legal compliances. He was very particular that there are no omissions. His power of grasping was phenomenal. Of course, most of you have worked with him, so you know better. See, once I prepared a 3-page matter on tax implication of a particular issue, which of course I took some time for me to, it took some time for me to prepare, and thought I'll leave it with him to ponder over. When I presented the same to him, he just took less than 5 minutes and discussed with me all the issues which I had raised. It was phenomenal. I mean, it was, of course, as most of you have yourself mentioned, they also felt he was a leader in the true sense of the term. He had very genuine concern towards all his colleagues, towards his employees, supervisory staff, and whoever was connected with the company. So out of his genuine concern towards them, and also their families, especially, he was instrumental in formation of Pond's Welfare Trust, and he was a trustee till his demise, which are even functional even today. Of course, he had inspired a great number of his associates, a large number of them who by themselves, they also proved to be great leaders later on. My association started with my father's association with him in 1980s. So, I mean, we miss a great person. He was a true specimen. He also believed in doing everything in an ethical fashion, ethical way. He was not only bothered about the success. He thought that everything should be achieved in an ethical fashion, in the true sense of the letter and spirit of law. Anyway, we will miss him. I mean, we all have to accept it as a fact of life and move on. Our condolences to his bereaved family. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Bhatt. PKV.
Thank you very much, sir. Actually, I've been going through very trying moments the whole of from December 30th. That's why I was keeping quiet for a long time. But I thought I shouldn't be selfish. I should share some thoughts on Mr. V, and I was hoping that there would be a space where we can join in. See, I worked quite intimately with him, although I was a very junior person on tax. And we used to discuss, but I mean, there's no point in discussing about that. But what I got out of him, all of us know that he's such a professional, a thoroughbred professional. I've seen his other side also. I don't know if I'm going to pleasantly surprise his daughter Ashwini. As soon as she had gone to the university, so once when I went in, normally it used to be a serious session. She was very happy. So we were just talking, and then he said, "You know why I'm happy?" He pulled out a letter. I don't know if it's an email, but it was typewritten. Printout was there. When the professor in US wrote to Mr. BN as a father of Ashwini, saying that he's got a well brought up child who will be a big success in life. He was so happy about it. He shared that personal thoughts with me. Congratulations, Ashwini. I've come for your wedding reception at the Madras Race Club, but it's very difficult for you to remember me. The second instance was when we were working about 8:39 one evening. Those were days when there was no cell phone. MGR had died, and I got a call from home to the office. One of the peons, he took the liberty of knocking the door. I think it was Swami and Unni who were there with us when we were, only two of us were in office. Then my brother told me that there is violence, be careful, near between Buhari Hotel and Arts College. So when I came in, he said, do you have to go? I said, no, it's not that. I think we have to go because MGR has died and there's a lot of violence. And then he said, okay, let's pack up for the day. And when we were listening, I told him, sir, you come in your Benz. If it's not too much of a problem, why don't I drive you home in the Maruti 800? The damage will be less if people throw stones. He thought for a moment. He said, yes, Vidyadharan is still here, his old driver. And he said, we will ask him to drive and I will ask him to drop you at your home. I mean, even when we were talking about taking him safely, he was more worried about how I will reach him. Now, that is the type of person he was, and he continues to remain. I've lost a great, I don't know how to describe that, a great person, a leader. Many of my friends still keep talking to me about how I used to work with him. The other thing is that after he had retired, Suresh Rajagopal's brother, who was a chartered accountant in Abu Dhabi, the Abu Dhabi chapter wanted a good speaker to come and address them, chartered accountants. So they suggested Mr. Vian's name. I sought a meeting with him. I asked him, and he went and addressed. It was a big success. And he's such a nice person that every time I meet him after that, you still remember, you arranged. It was not I who arranged. It was his charisma and leadership qualities which made the others call. But he always used to give the credit to the person who arranged for this, the nice person. And then next opportunity was when he was director of Foster's India. They had a meeting in Dubai, board meeting. And at that time, Suresh Rajagopal was the CFO of African and Eastern, ANE, who were the biggest distributors for him. So I connected Suresh Rajagopal with him. He was so happy. I think he visited Suresh and Nalini for lunch. Such a personal relationship he's developed. The last thing that he did, I mean, I met him many times after that. He and his wife came for my daughter's wedding. I mean, that was the biggest honor that I have had from him. I really pray for the family's happiness and success. All of them recover well, and all of them enjoy the moments in life with Mr. Narayan. Thank you all. Thank you.
It is very typical of Mr. Narayanan to remember the littlest thing that you do for him. And very many years ago, Ashwini was trying to get into Stella Maris, and he was talking to me, and I knew a lecturer there, so we gave an introduction, and Mr. Narayanan remembered it for 20, 30 years, and every time he would say that to me. It was really nothing, but any help he received, he made a very big thing of, and he gives huge help and he doesn't remember that. Shankar, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Balraman. So I joined rather later than all of you, 83, and I stayed for a fairly short time in Ponds. So I cannot claim the level of intimacy that many of you had with Mr. Narayanan. But I did have the good fortune of looking at the reflection of what he has created. And this is how it happened. The company that I started, CAMPS, at some point in time, it so happened that we needed to add management to our bench strength. And in fact, it starts with Mr. Balraman. There came a time when we needed a proper chairman for the company because our company was becoming large and people were looking at us, and there was some concern about the external reputation of the people running the company and so on and so forth. So I asked Mr. Balraman, he kindly agreed to be the chairman. And through him, then I spoke to Mr. VN, And he agreed to be a part of an advisory board that we created of some eminent personalities. So it was in that capacity that I actually dealt with him far longer than I ever had an opportunity to interact with him in ponds. More than that, a large number of colleagues who finally joined me as part of management of my company are all products of ponds. And it was amazing how we all just felt to working together. I mean, there was so many people have spoken about the culture, the DNA, the values, etc. And that commonality of that value system made us fall into, like, there was just no complication of, getting lateral hires and getting them settled into your culture. None of that. It was like there had never been a break between working together in ponds and then working together 10 years, 15 years later in my company. And that is totally to the credit of Mr. Narayanan and the company that he built. So as I said, it may not be through direct anecdotal experience of sort of interacting with Mr. Narayanan, like many of you had the good fortune. It was more through observing his product and benefiting from his product and inferring the greatness of what he did. My heartfelt condolences to his family. I had been in touch with him till recently, but not in the last year or so. As I said, my heartfelt condolences to his family and to all of you out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Shankar. Anyone else like Prasad, Koteshwar Prasad, TV Tyagarajan, Rajesh, anyone else? Okay, if none of you want to speak, Ashwini, Aarti, Mrs. Narayanan, Prem, any one of you want to say anything?
Yeah, Mr. Balraman, this is Aarti here.
Hi, Aarti.
So, I'm Mr. Narayan's younger daughter.
Yes,
so,
hi.
Just on, my mother is also here listening with me, and so is Ashwini.
Okay.
So, first of all, I knew Appa as a great dad. He was totally supportive of me, professionally in my medical career, personally for both Ashwini and myself. But, he's talked about all of you a lot. So though we have never met personally, I've heard about all his stories about you and I've heard all your names. So, we always knew he had, so many dimensions to him, both intellectually and ethically. And he passed on that to us also. But, it was great to hear these stories. It was very heartwarming, to listen to all of you. It gives us a lot of perspective about him, in this, sort of dimension. So, we really appreciate hearing this. It was wonderful to hear it. And, my mother would also like to say, thank you for sharing all these stories. It really sort of for 2 hours, it helped us, to the great loss to lose Appa. But it was wonderful hearing you, say these things about him. So on behalf of, Ashwini, Amma and I, thank you so much for taking the time. And we really appreciate hearing these stories.
Dr. Aarti, so nice of you to say this. I recall visiting your mother's wedding reception in Chennai very, very many years ago.
Right.
In T Nagar. And so, Mrs. Narayanan, namaskaram. I hope you are getting better. Mr. Narayanan always preached courage, confidence, and meeting any challenge, boldness, and he had great faith in God. And wherever he went, even to Kodaikanal, he would always go to Kurinjandava temple and so on. So everything will work out for you and your family. We Hindus believe in that the soul does not die. It's only the body that it changes the body. So Mr. Narayanan is with us, with you. And we are looking at doing something more permanent like having an annual memorial lecture in the name of Mr. V Narayanan and giving a couple of scholarships which you suggested. So the work is going on. Pandit is working on that along with Mr. Shankar. So when that is fruitful, we'll definitely let you know. Our idea is to have it on his birthday on January 29th every year. Maybe this year we'll have it on June 29th. So,
yeah, thanks, Mr. Balraman. That's wonderful to hear. And I think Mrs. Narayan is also here, and she just wanted me to say again that we've been listening to this for the past 2 hours. She has met many of you before, and she has also has a lot of memories. So it's nice to hear that Appa lives on in those memories with all of you.
He does. Now, guys, gentlemen, thanks for all of you. I know that each one of you have a unique relationship, very strong bond with Mr. Narayanan. It was, it was very, very good that you could speak from your heart, and that the family of Mr. Narayanan could listen to us. Like I said to you, Mrs. Narayanan, you are like, Mr. Narayanan was like Lord Ram. You are like Lady Sita, and we are all like Anjaneyas and the Vanar Senas. We are here to ensure that you are not finding anything difficult, whatever, be it a tax matter or LIC policies. We will take care of that. We'll ensure that there is no problem. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Narayanan. Kindly be there and guide us, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Good night, everyone. Thanks.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Balraman. Okay.
Hello? The meeting over?